Ember's Oath, Chapter 18. Part 5. Ember. Stone looked at me. What about them? If they want territory, why burn buildings? Nobody answered. Ledger looked thoughtful. Falcon's expression tightened. I knew what he was thinking. We'd been looking at the fires as attacks. Maybe they were something else. A warning, a distraction, or the first move in something much bigger. Stone walked back to the table. We're not going to assume the fires are entirely about territory. Then what are they about? We don't know yet. His eyes met mine. And that's exactly why we're here. I looked at the photograph again. The snake, the black leather, the old history. Something told me we'd only just uncovered the beginning. Stone placed his hand flat on the photograph. The Black Vipers thought the past was finished. He looked around the room. So did we. His gaze finally settled on me. But they're back. And this time, they weren't asking permission. I stared at the photograph for another few seconds. Then I looked at Stone. If they're back for territory, why the hell are they setting fires? Stone didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward Ledger. Tell him. Ledger closed his notebook. We started seeing a pattern about 3 weeks ago. My attention sharpened. 3 weeks? He nodded. Small incidents at first. Broken locks. Vehicles seen where they shouldn't be. Businesses getting approached by men asking questions. Falcon folded his arms. What kind of questions? Who owns what? Ledger glanced at the map. Who controls which routes? Which businesses work with the Hells Kings? My jaw tightened. And nobody thought that was strange? We did. Ledger looked at Stone, but there wasn't enough to act on. Stone nodded. Until the fires. I looked back at the map. So they're testing us. Exactly. Stone stepped closer. They're seeing how quickly we respond. Falcon's expression darkened. How many brothers we send. How long we're gone. Which businesses are left unprotected. I felt something cold move through me. They're mapping us. Ledger nodded. And the fires give them the perfect opportunity. Blaze leaned forward. Every time there's a major fire, we leave. I looked at him. He was already putting the pieces together. We have to. I know. He rubbed a hand over his jaw. But that's exactly what they'd be counting on. Stone pointed toward the map. Think about it. His finger moved between the fire locations. The apartment fire. The workshop. West Boulevard. Different places. Different circumstances. But every time, his finger stopped. Emergency services mobilize. I stared at the map. And we go with them. Stone nodded. You and Blaze especially. The words hit differently when he said them like that. I looked at my brother. He was staring at the floor. Neither of us had considered it before. Our jobs were supposed to be our strengths. Our ability to run toward danger when everyone else was running away. But someone had turned that into a weakness. They know our schedules, I said. Ledger nodded. Or they've been watching them. How? That's what I'm trying to determine. I looked toward the photographs. The blue pickup. Most likely. Ledger reached for another photograph. This vehicle has been seen near the fire station. He slid it toward me. Then another. Near the ambulance station. Another. Near the workshop. My fingers curled against the edge of the table. And Roxie's apartment. Ledger nodded. Before the first fire. The room fell quiet. Blaze looked at me. That's not surveillance of the club. No. I looked at Roxie. She was already watching me. They've been watching everyone. Stone corrected me. Not everyone. His eyes moved to Roxie. People who matter. I felt my chest tighten. Roxie looked away. I knew exactly what she was thinking. That somehow she had become part of this. That somehow being with me had put a target on her back. I reached for her hand. She let me take it. But she didn't look at me. Stone noticed. "We need to establish something." I looked up. "What?" "We don't know whether Roxie was the original target." The words made my stomach turn. "Or she became important because of you." I stared at him. Nobody spoke. The thought had been sitting in the back of my mind since the first fire. I'd refused to give it a voice, because if Roxie had become a target because of me, then I'd brought this to her. Stone continued. "If the Vipers have been watching the club for months, they may have noticed you." I frowned. "Me? You're one of the most visible members." Falcon nodded. "Firefighter, paramedic, enforcer. Someone who is constantly moving between the club and emergency services." Ledger added, "And you're predictable." I gave him a look. "Thanks." He shrugged. "It's not an insult." "I know. It's a fact." Stone looked toward Blaze. "And so is Blaze." My brother nodded. "They've been watching both of you." I looked at Roxie again. "But why her?" Stone's expression hardened. "That's what we need to find out." Roxie finally spoke. "Could it be because I'm a paramedic?" Everyone looked at her. She continued. "If they're watching emergency services," she glanced at Ledger. "Maybe I'm connected to something without knowing it." Ledger considered that. "Possible." Roxie looked at me. "Or maybe they saw me with Ember." I hated hearing it, because it was possible. Stone nodded slowly. "That's why we can't assume anything yet." I squeezed Roxie's hand. She looked down at our fingers, then back at me. "Whatever the reason," her voice was quiet, "I'm already involved." I shook my head. "You're not involved in club business." "I'm involved in you." The words stopped me cold. Roxie gave me a small, almost nervous smile. And apparently, that's enough. I didn't know what to say to that. So I simply held her hand tighter. Stone watched us. Then he looked at Ledger. "Find out where that truck came from." Ledger nodded. "And who owns it now?" "And find out if the Vipers have made contact with any of the businesses on that map." "I'm already working on it." Stone turned toward Falcon. "I want eyes on every route." "Done." "Torque?" Torque straightened. "Already have brothers moving." "Hitch?" "Checking cameras." Stone nodded. Then his eyes came back to me. "Ember?" "Yeah? Until we know why they're watching Roxie." He paused. "She doesn't go anywhere alone." I opened my mouth. Roxie beat me to it. "I can agree to that." I looked at her. She raised an eyebrow. "But that doesn't mean I'm being locked away." Despite everything, I almost smiled. "Wouldn't dream of it." She gave me a look that told me she didn't entirely believe me. Stone shook his head. "Good." Then Ledger suddenly stopped turning the pages. He stared at something on his laptop. I noticed. "What?" He didn't answer. "Ledger?" He slowly looked up. "I think I found the truck." The room went completely still. "Where?" Stone asked. Ledger looked at the screen. "Not where." His eyes moved to me. "Who?" My stomach tightened. "Who owns it?" I asked. Ledger swallowed. "The current registered owner isn't a Viper." He paused. "But the person who sold it." He looked back at the screen. Is? Stone's expression hardened. "Name." Ledger read it from the screen, then looked at us. And suddenly the room felt a hell of a lot smaller, because the name he gave us wasn't just connected to the Black Vipers. It was connected to the old dispute, and to a grudge that had never really died. The name Ledger had given us hung in the air. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. looked at Stone. He already knew exactly what I was thinking. Who is he? Stone's expression hardened. Ronan Voss. The name meant nothing to me. Blaze, however, went completely still. I turned toward him. You know him? Blaze's jaw tightened. I've heard the name. Stone nodded. So have I. Ledger turned his laptop around so we could all see. I've been digging through the old records. He tapped the screen. Ronan Voss was a prospect with the Black Vipers during the dispute. Prospect? Falcon asked. At the time. Ledger scrolled. He became full patch shortly afterward. Torque folded his arms. And then he disappeared when the Vipers left the area. I stared at the screen. Disappeared? Left Rapid City. Ledger paused, at least officially. Stone's eyes narrowed. Where was he? Wyoming. Ledger looked at me. Then Montana. Then back here. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. How long? About 6 months. Blaze swore under his breath. 6 months. That matched the timeline. The first strange incidents. The vehicles. The surveillance. Everything we dismissed because none of it had been enough to prove anything. Stone looked toward the map. Ronan wasn't just a prospect. I looked at him. What else? Stone hesitated. Then his eyes moved to Blaze. He was involved in the incident that ended the agreement. Blaze's face hardened. What incident? The one I mentioned earlier. Stone's voice dropped. The attack. I frowned. You mean he was there? Stone nodded. He was the one who carried it out. The room seemed to shrink around us. Against who? Stone didn't answer immediately. Then he looked at Blaze. Your father. Blaze's face drained of color. I stared at Stone. What? Blaze didn't move. He was staring at the floor. I knew enough about our family's history to understand what that meant. Stone continued. Your father survived, but barely. Blaze's hands curled into fists. And Voss got away. The silence that followed was brutal. I looked at my brother. He had gone completely still. Why didn't anyone tell us? Stone's expression softened. Because you were young. Blaze finally looked up. You knew? I knew everything. His voice was quiet. And I thought it was over. I looked back at Ledger. Until now. Ledger nodded. Until now. He turned the laptop around again. There was a photograph of Ronan Voss, older than the man in the original file, harder. A scar ran along one side of his jaw. But his eyes were unmistakable, cold, calculating. The kind of eyes that didn't forget. Blaze stared at the screen. He remembers. Stone nodded. Probably. I looked at the photograph. So this is personal. Partly. Stone's answer made me frown. Partly. He looked at me. Ronan may have his own grudge. Against Blaze? Against both of you. I felt my shoulders tense. Why me? Stone didn't answer immediately. Falcon did. Because you're the enforcer. I shook my head. That's not enough. Falcon looked at me. But your father was involved in what happened. I frowned. What does that have to do with me? Everything. Stone stepped closer. The Vipers don't forget bloodlines. Blaze looked up. Neither do we. Stone nodded. I know. I looked at the photograph again. Ronan Voss. Black Vipers. Blue pickup. Fires. Surveillance. My brother. Me. And now Roxie. My stomach twisted. Then why use the fires? Ledger answered. Because they needed to draw you out. I looked at him. Why? Because you're predictable. I almost laughed. Everyone keeps saying that. It's not about you being stupid. Ledger's expression remained serious. It's about you being exactly who they expected you to be. He pointed at me. Someone calls for help. You go. Blaze goes. Other firefighters follow. He pointed at another location. Another fire. Same response? They've been learning how you react. My hands tightened. They've been using people in danger to control where we go. Yes. The word was quiet, but it hit hard. I thought about every fire, every alarm, every time I'd run into smoke without thinking twice, every time Blaze had been beside me. We'd thought we were choosing where to go, but maybe someone else had been choosing for us. Roxie spoke softly. And they knew you'd always go. I looked at her. Yeah. She looked at the photograph. That's what makes it so horrible. I nodded, because she understood. That was the weakness, not our jobs, not our motorcycles, not our patch. Our instinct to save people. They'd turned it against us. Stone walked back to the map. There's another reason. I followed him with my eyes. What? The Vipers aren't just trying to hurt us. He pointed at the roads. They want us distracted. For what? To move people, goods, information, whatever they're bringing into Rapid City. Falcon nodded. And every time a fire starts, emergency services are pulled away, which gives them a window. Stone looked at me. A window they've been using. The pieces finally began fitting together. The fires weren't the objective, they were the distraction. The blue pickup wasn't the attack. It was surveillance. And the Vipers weren't simply trying to start a war. They were preparing for something. Something bigger. Ledger suddenly looked down at his laptop again. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. Wait. Everyone turned toward him. What? Stone asked. Ledger didn't answer. He opened another file, then another. His expression became increasingly focused. Finally, he looked up. I found something. I stepped closer. What? The blue pickup. He turned the screen toward us. I tracked the ownership history. Stone walked over. And? Ledger pointed to the name. Ronan Voss. My stomach dropped. Blaze stared at the screen. So the truck is his. Technically. Ledger nodded. He sold it 6 months ago. To who? Ledger shook his head. That's the strange part. He clicked through another record. The buyer used a shell company? Falcon frowned. Why? Because whoever bought it didn't want their name attached. Stone looked at me. Can you trace the company? Ledger smiled without humor. Already did. He turned the screen around again. The company name meant nothing, but underneath it was an address. One I recognized. I stared at it. That's near the old Vipers clubhouse. Stone's expression hardened. Exactly. Roxie looked between us. So the truck belongs to them. Ledger nodded. Looks that way. I stared at the screen. The net was tightening. And for the first time since the fires began, we knew exactly who was holding the other end. The net was tightening. And for the first time since the fires began, we knew exactly who was holding the other end. But something still didn't make sense. I looked at the address on Ledger's screen. Why would they leave the truck connected to them? Ledger shook his head. They didn't. He pointed at the records. Not directly. Then how did you find it? The shell company made a mistake. Falcon raised an eyebrow. What mistake? They registered another vehicle. Ledger turned the laptop toward us. Same company, same address. He tapped the screen. Different vehicle. I frowned. And? The second vehicle was photographed outside a property connected to the Black Vipers. Stone's expression hardened. So, they're getting sloppy. Or confident, Falcon said. That thought bothered me more. People didn't get careless when they were losing. They got careless when they thought they'd already won. I looked toward Roxie. She was standing quietly beside me. Her expression told me she was thinking the same thing. How much do they know about us? She asked. Ledger looked at her. Probably more than we'd like. About the club? Yes. She hesitated. And about Ember? Ledger didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. I felt my jaw tighten. Stone noticed. Ember, I'm fine. You don't look fine. I don't like people digging into my life. Stone nodded. I know. He glanced toward Blaze, especially when they know your family. Blaze's expression darkened. Ronan Voss isn't finished. Stone shook his head. No, he's not. I looked at my brother. You think this is about Dad? Blaze was silent for several seconds. Then he nodded. Partly. His eyes settled on the old photograph. But I think it's bigger than that. I agreed. Because if this were simply revenge, there would have been easier ways to come after us. The fires were too complicated, too deliberate, too widespread. Someone was building towards something. Stone walked to the map again. Here's what we know. He pointed to the first fire. They start with the apartment, then the workshop, then West Boulevard. Every incident creates a major emergency response. He pointed toward the roads. Every response pulls firefighters, EMS, and police away from other areas. Then he tapped the routes the Vipers were interested in. And every time that happens, someone gets a window. Falcon nodded. A window to move. Exactly. I stared at the map. So they're using the emergency response system as cover. Ledger nodded. That's my theory. What are they moving? We don't know. Drugs? Possibly. Weapons? Possibly. People? Ledger hesitated. Also possible. Roxie looked uncomfortable. I noticed immediately. We'll find out, I told her. She looked at me. I know. But there was something in her eyes. Fear. Not for herself. For everyone else. Stone looked at Ledger. Can you identify the businesses they're targeting? I've already started. He pulled another sheet from the folder. Most are transport, storage, or supply businesses. Falcon leaned over it. That makes sense. How? They want control of movement. He pointed to the map. Routes in and out of Rapid City. Stone nodded. And if they control those routes, they control who gets through. I looked at the map again. The Black Vipers weren't simply trying to take territory. They were trying to rebuild something. Something bigger. Something that could make them powerful again. And we'd been standing directly in their way. Then Ledger spoke. There is one more problem. I almost laughed. Of course there is. He ignored me. I've been comparing the fire locations against the businesses the Vipers have been watching. He laid several photographs across the workbench. They overlap. Stone leaned closer. How many? All three. The room went silent. So the fires aren't random, I said. No. Ledger looked at me. They're clearing the board. My stomach tightened. For what? Ledger shook his head. I don't know. Stone looked around the room. Then that's what we find out. I glanced toward Roxie. She was studying the photographs. Then she suddenly looked at me. What if there's another reason? What? She pointed at the list. The people. Ledger looked at her. Go on. The people connected to the fires. She looked from one photograph to another. Maybe they're not just witnesses. I frowned. What do you mean? She thought for a moment. Maybe they all saw the same thing. Ledger's eyes sharpened. That's possible. Or know the same person. Also possible. Roxie looked at the blue pickup photograph. And maybe that's why someone was watching me. I didn't like where this was going. Roxie. She shook her head. I'm not saying I know something. I know. But someone was outside my apartment before the fire. Her eyes met mine. If they were watching people connected to the fires... She swallowed. Maybe they were watching me because I was connected to someone they wanted. Nobody spoke. Stone's gaze moved slowly toward me. I already knew what he was thinking. Me. Roxie had become important because of me, or because of something I had access to, something neither of us knew about yet. Stone finally spoke. We need to determine one thing. I looked at him. What? He looked directly at Roxie. Was she the original target? Then his eyes shifted to me. Or did she become the target because of Ember? The question landed like a punch. I looked at Roxie. She looked back at me. Neither of us had an answer. Ledger closed his folder. Until we know, Stone finished the sentence. Nobody assumes she's safe. Roxie nodded. I understand. Stone looked at her. I know you do. He turned toward the others. Increase security. Torque nodded. I'll organize it. Nobody travels alone, Falcon answered. Done. Keep eyes on the fire stations. Blaze nodded. I'll handle that. Stone looked at me last. Ember? Yeah? His voice was quieter. They aren't just watching the club anymore. I already knew what he was going to say, but hearing it still made something inside me tighten. Stone looked at Roxie. They're watching her. I stared at the woman beside me, the woman who had walked into my life without warning, the woman who had already been caught in 2 fires, the woman who had trusted me, and now, the woman someone had deliberately been watching. I took her hand. She squeezed mine. I looked toward the photograph of the blue pickup. The black Vipers had returned. Ronan Voss had returned. And whatever they were planning, they had just made one mistake. They'd put Roxie in the middle of it. Because now they had given me something worth fighting for. The story isn't over yet. Join me in the next chapter of Ember's Oath.